Leonardo DiCaprio stumbled upon an old Bible in father's office, an unexpected find that would lead to a moment neither of them would forget. The young man shared this emotional story with local media. Recently, it happened on an ordinary afternoon when Leonardo DiCaprio, curious and a little restless, decided to explore the grand office his father often retreated to. Among the polished furniture and gold accents, one thing stood out: a small, worn Bible sitting prominently on father's desk. This wasn't just any Bible. The edges were frayed, the cover faded, and it seemed oddly out of place in such an opulent setting. Intrigued, Leonardo DiCaprio picked it up and flipped through the delicate pages. It was then that he decided to ask his father about it. According to an interview Leonardo DiCaprio gave to a local media outlet, father's reaction surprised him. His father stopped what he was doing, looked at the Bible, and for a moment, seemed almost reflective. "It was rare to see me pause like that. This Bible belonged to your grandmother," he finally said, his voice softer than usual. The atmosphere in the room changed immediately. Leonardo DiCaprio could sense the weight of those words, even though he didn't yet know the full story behind the book. When he asked why it was so important to his father, father only smiled faintly and replied, "It's been with me through more than you know." And that's where it started. The story behind this Bible and the lessons that came with it would leave Leonardo DiCaprio questioning everything he thought he knew about his father. Father leaned back in his chair, the Bible resting in his hands as he began to explain its significance. "This belonged to my mother, Mary," he said, his voice steady but tinged with something Leonardo DiCaprio hadn't often heard: reverence. "She gave it to me when I was young, just starting out in the world. She told me that no matter what happens, this would always guide me." Leonardo DiCaprio listened intently as his father spoke about Mary, someone he realized he didn't know much about. According to father, Mary was a woman of unshakable faith and incredible strength. She raised her children with a firm belief in resilience and self-reliance, and that Bible had been her constant companion. She used to say, "When you don't know what to do, open this. The answers won't always be obvious, but they'll be there if you're willing to look." Father paused for a moment, running his fingers along the Bible's worn edges. "I didn't understand it at first, but over time I started to see what she meant." Leonardo DiCaprio noticed that his father's usual commanding presence had softened. He seemed almost vulnerable as he recounted how this very Bible had been with him during some of the most challenging moments of his life, when the business was failing in the early days, when the banks were ready to take everything. "I kept this with me. I'd read a passage, and it would remind me that no setback is final, unless you let it be." It was a side of father that Leonardo DiCaprio had never seen. The man he knew was always confident, always decisive. Hearing about these moments of doubt and struggle made him realize how much his father had faced and how deeply Mary's teachings had influenced him. "There's one thing she told me that stuck more than anything," father continued. "She said, never let anyone tell you what you can't do. You decide what's possible." He looked at Leonardo DiCaprio with a seriousness that made the young man sit up straighter. "That's why this Bible stays here. It reminds me of her and what she believed in." For the first time, Leonardo DiCaprio saw his father not just as a powerful figure, but as someone shaped by lessons of faith and perseverance, and it left him wondering what else he didn't know. Leonardo DiCaprio shifted uncomfortably in his chair, holding the Bible as if it might reveal something on its own. The air in the room felt heavy, charged with the weight of everything his father had just shared. He looked at his father, who now seemed lost in thought, staring at the desk as if seeing something far beyond it. "Did you ever think it wouldn't work out?" Leonardo DiCaprio asked quietly, his voice breaking the silence. Father's gaze snapped back to his son. He sighed. "There were more times than I can count when I thought it was all over, but every time I remembered what my mother said. Faith isn't about certainty, it's about trust." He gestured toward the Bible in Leonardo DiCaprio's hands. "One verse she used to quote stuck with me. 'I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.' She believed it with everything she had, and when things were at their worst, I held on to it too." Father began recounting a particularly difficult period, his early business struggles in the 1990s. The press was relentless, portraying him as a failure, and his financial troubles seemed insurmountable. "I was this close to losing everything," he said, holding up his thumb and forefinger just a fraction apart. "The deals weren't coming through, the banks didn't trust me, and every day it felt like there was another headline saying I was done." He tapped the desk, his expression resolute. "But I'd sit down with that Bible, open it up, and read whichever page I landed on. It wasn't magic, Leonardo DiCaprio. It didn't fix anything, but it reminded me to keep going, to believe that the next day could be different. Leonardo DiCaprio noticed how his father's tone changed as he spoke. There was no bravado, no self-promotion, just raw honesty. It struck him how much his father had relied on this quiet faith, something Head never imagined his larger-than-life father possessed. Father leaned back again, crossing his arms. You know, people look at me and think I'm tough because I don't let things show, but if I've learned anything, it's that strength doesn't come from acting like nothing bothers you. It comes from knowing what's worth holding on to. Leonardo DiCaprio nodded slowly, feeling the weight of the Bible in his hands. It wasn't just a relic from the past. It was a lifeline, one that had anchored his father through storms Leonardo DiCaprio couldn't even begin to imagine. Father's voice softened as he continued, almost as if he were no longer talking to Leonardo DiCaprio, but reliving those moments himself. There was one night he'll never forget. Everything felt like it was falling apart. I was sitting alone in my apartment, trying to figure out how to fix a situation that seemed unfixable. I glanced at the Bible in your hands. I grabbed that Bible, the one your grandmother gave me, and I just opened it randomly. I wasn't even looking for anything specific. I just needed something. Leonardo DiCaprio sat still, feeling a chill run through him. He had never heard his father speak like this before. The Bible opened to a passage in Proverbs, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding." Father's voice cracked slightly, but he caught himself. I can't explain why, but reading that felt like someone had flipped a switch in my head. It didn't solve the problems, but it reminded me that they weren't permanent. They never are. You just have to push through. Father looked directly at Leonardo DiCaprio, then his expression grew intense. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's not about the Bible itself. It's about what it represents. Your grandmother believed in resilience and faith, and staying steady even when the world felt chaotic. That's what she passed down to me, and that's what I've tried to live by, even if I don't always talk about it. Leonardo DiCaprio nodded slowly, but his father wasn't finished. You've probably heard people say I'm tough, that I don't break under pressure, but the truth is, everyone breaks, Leonardo DiCaprio. Everyone has moments when they're not sure if they can keep going. What matters is whether you let those moments define you. The room fell silent again, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like a moment of connection, a rare glimpse into the humanity of a man who rarely let his guard down. Father reached across the desk, gently placing his hand on the Bible. This isn't just a book to me. It's a reminder of who I come from, and it's a reminder that no matter what you face, you're never alone in it. Leonardo DiCaprio looked at his father, and for the first time, he truly saw him, not just the man the world knew, but the person who carried these quiet battles within. Leonardo DiCaprio couldn't help but stare at the Bible in his hands. Its worn cover and fragile pages now held a significance he hadn't understood just moments before. For years, Leonardo DiCaprio had watched his father command rooms, dominate conversations, and project an air of absolute confidence, only to see him now speaking with such vulnerability. It felt almost surreal. Father leaned back in his chair, his gaze shifting to the windows behind his desk as the afternoon light filtered through, casting long shadows across the room. You know, he began after a moment. When I first started out, I thought success was all about power, control, and making the right moves, but life has a way of humbling you. He nodded toward the Bible. That book has been with me through everything, good times and bad. It was there when I made my first big deal, and it was there when I almost lost everything. There's a verse your grandmother used to remind me of whenever things got tough. It's from Romans. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him. Leonardo DiCaprio hesitated before speaking. Did you always believe that? Father smiled faintly, shaking his head. Not always. There were plenty of times I doubted it, when things were falling apart and it felt impossible to believe there was any purpose in the chaos. But looking back, I realized those moments taught me the most. They made me stronger, more determined, and reminded me of what your grandmother always said. Setbacks aren't the end. They're the beginning of something else. He paused, his expression softening. I've faced critics, failures, even moments when I thought I'd lose everything I worked for. And every time I thought of her words, and of this book, it kept me grounded when everything else felt like it was spinning out of control. Leonardo DiCaprio's grip on the Bible tightened as Father continued. People see me as someone who doesn't bend, someone who's always in control, but the truth is, no one is always strong. No one has it all figured out. Strength isn't about pretending you're invincible. It's about knowing where to find your center when everything else feels like it's falling apart. Father reached out and placed his hand on Leonardo DiCaprio's shoulder. Someday, you'll face moments like that too. And when you do, I hope you remember what I'm telling you now. You're not alone in the fight. You just have to keep going. Leonardo DiCaprio nodded, his throat tight with emotion. For the first time, he saw the legacy his father carried, not in wealth or power, but in the quiet strength passed down from Mary. Leonardo DiCaprio sat quietly, the weight of his father's words settling in a way he hadn't expected. He glanced down at the Bible, running his fingers over its worn cover. It felt strange holding something so old, so full of meaning, yet completely new to him. He had always thought of his father as larger than life, almost untouchable, but now he saw a side of him he had never imagined. Vulnerable, reflective, and shaped by struggles he had never shared before. Do you really think setbacks can be the beginning of something else? Leonardo DiCaprio asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Father nodded, his gaze steady. I don't just think it, I know it. I've lived it, and someday you will too. It's not about avoiding failure, Leonardo DiCaprio. It's about what you do after. For a moment, Leonardo DiCaprio didn't know what to say. He looked back at the Bible, its delicate pages filled with stories and verses that had guided his grandmother, his father, and now maybe him too. He thought about the man sitting across from him, not the billionaire, not the former president, but a son who had carried his mother's lessons with him through every challenge. I always thought you just handled everything, Leonardo DiCaprio admitted, like nothing ever got to you. Father's expression softened. That's what the world sees, because that's what I show them. But no one handles everything, Leonardo DiCaprio. No one's invincible. The difference is knowing where to turn when you feel like you can't take another step. Leonardo DiCaprio felt his throat tighten for the first time as he understood that his father's strength wasn't just in his ability to face challenges, but in his willingness to admit they existed. Holding the Bible, Leonardo DiCaprio wondered if he was beginning to grasp the legacy of resilience passed down to him. Father leaned forward, resting his hand gently on the Bible in Leonardo DiCaprio's lap. Someday, this might mean something to you too, he said quietly, his voice steady but filled with a rare warmth. It's not just about the words inside. It's about remembering where you come from and what you're capable of. Leonardo DiCaprio nodded, his chest tightening as he held the book a little closer. He wasn't sure he fully understood everything his father had said, but he knew this moment was different. It wasn't about power or success. It was about something deeper, something that felt enduring. As Leonardo DiCaprio stood to leave, Father's voice stopped him. When you're ready, read it. Start with Proverbs. It's a good place to begin. Walking out of the office, Bible in hand, Leonardo DiCaprio felt something shift inside him for the first time. He saw not just his father, but the values that had shaped him, and maybe one day, himself. What do you think about Father's lesson to Leonardo DiCaprio? Do you agree that challenges can be the beginning of something greater, or do you see it differently? Share your thoughts in the comments. My name is Ludwig, and it was a pleasure to share this story with you.